So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the hearing that we've organised today between Mary Lawler, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders and migrant rights defenders working in the Greek context. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you today about your work in Greece, some of the challenges that you've faced, and ways in which you think Mary could support you as human rights defenders from the position of UN Special Rapporteur. So I'm going to hand over tonight to Mary to say a few words of introduction. Mary?
Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. I took up the mandate last May 2020, and I have limited tools at my disposal. I will tell you about them. But before that, I want to say that when I prioritized what I wanted to concentrate on during the course of my term as mandate holder, I prioritized defenders working on refugees and migrant rights. So we're very, very glad to meet you all here today because it is a subject that I really do care deeply about. Not only, as Michael said, the refugees and migrants who find themselves in such terrible conditions, but particularly I find it abhorrent that defenders who are working for their rights are criminalized and smeared. So I'm very glad to be here. As I said, I've limited tools. What I can do and what I do is I send formal communications on the specific situation of human rights defenders to states and detailing whatever the incident is, or the threat or the attack, and then they get 60 days to respond. I also do a couple of country visits every year, except not with COVID, and we try as far as possible to highlight cases on Twitter and on the website when we don't have capacity to take up formal communications through the office of the Special Rapporteur. So I'm really here just to listen. I do have to remind you that although some context, and I do know some of the context, is important, what I really need is your own specific situation and the situation of other human rights defenders, because that's all I can act on in terms of the mandate. I'm specifically working on human rights defenders. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. So now I'd like to ask the first speaker, Sean Binder. If Sean, you could open your microphone and take the floor. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you kindly for allowing me to participate in this hearing. My name is Sean Binder. I'll get into my experience. I coordinated civilian search and rescue efforts on the southern Lesbos island from autumn 2017 until summer 2018. And with medical professionals, maritime rescuers, and interpreters, our teams provided vital services which the authorities, given their limited resources, often could not. Oftentimes, I was asked if we could share our first response equipment. We even offered the Coast Guard our first response training, something they did not always have, in fact. We could consistently get medics to the coast fastest. And considering that the Mediterranean is the deadliest sea in the world, every extra second can make all the difference. All of this is to say that not only did we conduct search and rescue activity in keeping with international maritime obligations and human rights law, we did so specifically and with hindsight, ironically, with continued communication with the police and the Coast Guard. And I say ironically because the police and prosecution charged my colleagues and me with such crimes as being part of a criminal organization, money laundering, forgery, fraud, facilitation of illegal entry, and my childhood favorite, spying. To date, I have spent 107 days in pretrial detention. I was in jail on Lesbos and in prison on Chios Island. It is no surprise that being stripped of your rights and being kept in extremely poor conditions at the whim of fairly aggressive police officers is horrendous. But while I felt I had plenty of reason to feel sorry for myself, I was struck by this prolific use of detention as a means of punishing asylum seekers. For example, I met a young Afghan man right at the beginning of my time in prison who was held in jail without being given reason, without access to a lawyer, and without knowing how long for. A German national of Yazidi origin found himself in jail with me because the port police reckoned his valid passport might be a fake. It wasn't, and it took us a month to prove that, to get him out. As ever, the most vulnerable face the worst in our systems, and those who might help them do increasingly too. So we still face 25 years in prison. 25 years in prison, I might add, for what Human Rights Watch said was the criminalization of saving lives. And despite these outrageously heinous charges, we're still waiting for trial 3 years on. The prosecution has not even concluded their investigation into the felonies. And it's no surprise. It is incredibly difficult to find wrongdoing where there patently was none. And this has led to ridiculous arguments. For example, I'm an alleged spy because I use encrypted communication services. They're referring to WhatsApp. On another occasion, I supposedly failed to notify the authorities of asylum boat arrivals. The fact that this isn't a crime notwithstanding, we could prove by reference to the prosecution's own evidence that I did inform the authorities, twice in fact. Each and every charge can be rebutted in this manner. And then why, with such vapid evidence, are we being prosecuted? Because the goal here is a chill factor. In effect, the prosecution have managed to frighten any would-be search and rescuers from undertaking life-saving missions. The day after our arrest, virtually all rescue NGOs stopped operating in that region. Today, there are no active search and rescue boats on the island of Lesbos, embroiling us in lengthy and costly legal procedures, throwing us in pretrial detention with convicted murderers, making us wait in limbo for years on end. Horrible as it is for me personally, it's all the more outrageous as it is a blatant attack on human rights work in general. Indeed, having spent the years since my arrest researching the criminalization of saving lives, this is by no means isolated. It has happened to at least over 180 individuals around the European Union. And worse than just criminalizing human rights work, this criminalizes effectively the right to seek asylum. With our first misdemeanor trial finally scheduled for November 18th, I think the best thing we could hope for is we need voices like that of the Special Rapporteur to communicate with the authorities that the criminalization of saving lives is of the deepest concern and simply cannot go unchallenged. Thank you.
Much, Sean, for that testimony. So after everybody has had the opportunity to speak, Mary's going to be responding. So we'll hold off for comments or any further questions until then. And now I'd like to ask Marie Bank and Isa Kushka, who are going to share the time, if they'd like to speak. Go ahead, guys.
Yes, thank you, Michael, so much. And especially thank you, Mary, for this hearing and your efforts to protect human rights defenders. Please know that it is greatly appreciated. I'm here today for Marilibeum, together with Isa, a legal advisor in our team. We are a small Berlin-based non-profit association founded in 2018 by a transnational collective of activists. With our ships, we monitor human rights in the Aegean Sea, mainly off the coast of Lesbos, and trying to expose the atrocities at the European external borders and raise awareness about crimes committed against people on the move, such as illegal pushbacks. We are also part of the Border Violence Monitoring Network. In the past 2 years, we have witnessed a drastic rise in human rights violations, an establishment of extreme brutality against people on the move, and systematic criminal behavior, such as pushbacks by state actors on sea and land. Meanwhile, the government has taken all measures possible to stop civil society groups from witnessing and reporting on the atrocities. The space for solidarity groups is continuously shrinking. Since the new government took office, government officials are actively trying to create the absurd narrative that NGOs are responsible for everything, ranging from the arrival of people on the move to shipwrecks causing death, and the difficult situation on the hotspot islands. They also discredit our work by calling it, quote unquote, Turkish propaganda and reports about illegal pushbacks, quote unquote, fake news, to deviate from the real crimes they are committing. By this, they create a dangerous atmosphere for human rights defenders in the field. Beginning of March 2020, our crew was attacked and intimidated several times by presumably local fascists who once tried to set the boat on fire while the crew was aboard. The Coast Guard, the police, and port police repeatedly said that they cannot protect us. This led to our boat having to anchor offshore for over 6 months. In this time, our crew members in the field were harassed by authorities on land, threatened with charges of espionage, taken to the police station, or having their passports taken away when trying to distribute emergency relief to people who, for example, were detained at the beaches while Greece suspended the right to seek asylum in March 2020. We are also among the many groups and individuals affected by a wave of criminalization. In September 2020, our boat, the Mare Liberum, was raided by police, army, and special operations. Most of the crew was taken to the police station and one person harassed for their ethnicity. Shortly after, the police gave a press conference in which they announced that there had been an investigation against 2 third-country nationals and 33 people from 4 different NGOs facing charges for espionage, revealing state secrets, forming a criminal organization, and facilitating illegal entry. Once again, trying to create the absurd narrative that there is a giant secret network of NGOs controlling the movement of refugees. In the past 2 years, we were only able to do 1 mission. It was not even a monitoring mission at the border. Instead, we visited different projects on other islands. The Coast Guard stopped the crew several times to check the passports, papers, as well as search the boat. One time, this was conducted by masked men. Another time, our boat was followed by Coast Guard ships whose mounted artillery was continuously pointing at our crew, even as they were moving. We would go out on a monitoring mission at the border very soon, despite the attempts by Greek authorities to intimidate us. The number of pushbacks at a historic high, and there's a clear escalation of violence. We fear for the safety of our crew, but see a great need for the civil eye to return to the Aegean to stand in solidarity with people on the move. And yes, I would like to give the word to Isa now.
Thank you, Marie. I'm just here to briefly speak about the new law, the new change in law from the Greek government regarding NGOs and the work at sea. This change in law dictates that NGOs at sea can only be operative if the organization is registered in the NGO registry, which I'm sure our colleagues and friends will speak about shortly. And if the organization is included in local emergency plans and if it works under the orders of the Coast Guard. The penalties in case of non-compliance range from 1 to 3 years of prison and a fine for the organization and individuals involved. This new law would completely put our organization out of operations. The essence of our work is to monitor human rights violations at sea. And the government has done great efforts to avoid anyone witnessing the violations of human rights happening at the border. Therefore, it is impossible for us to do our work, as we can assume that we will most probably not get accepted in the registry and not be called by the Coast Guard. The same would probably happen to the only other rescue boat in the Aegean, which has not been able to operate, although it is part of the local emergency plan dictated by the law. But they're never called or even prevented to respond by the authorities. With our civil society organizations in the Aegean, at the moment the sea belongs to the Hellenic Coast Guard and other governmental actors, such as the Greek military, Frontex, and NATO. The EU has stopped the funding of the Greek border protection because of reports of these human rights violations and are demanding now an independent monitoring mechanism. Meanwhile, our organization is prevented from monitoring by all means possible. How you can help us is that we would like you to add to the report of the General Assembly and to the Human Rights Council that the Greek government is creating a shrinking space for solidarity and civil society work in the Aegean Sea through criminalization and administrative obstacles. The Aegean has become a black box in which allegations of human rights violations cannot be monitored. We would also like to welcome you in Greece during a fact-finding mission, if possible, as we believe that this shrinking space is not only in the water, but also in land. And we know that fellow HRDs are experiencing the same or similar repression that we do. It would also be of great support if you could write an official communication to the Greek government stating the situation of HRDs in Greece. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Isa and Marie. So we're going to go to our next speaker now, who is Tommy Olsen. Tommy, I see you there. If you'd like to open your microphone and take the floor.
Hello, I'm Tommy Olsen, founder and sole member of Aegean Boat Report, a Norwegian NGO which collects and publishes information about the situation for asylum seekers on the Greek Aegean Islands, including statistics, arrival information, situation reports, and violation of international laws and human rights. By publishing arrival information and these reports from camps on social media, I soon got the attention of the right-wing elements, especially in Greece. Death threats against me and my family are not uncommon. And there has been a sharp increase, in particular since July 2019, when the new democracy took power in Greece, in unfounded accusation against Aegean Boat Report and me in the Greek press, particularly by newspapers who has close ties to the Greek government. These accusations, none of which have been true, were made to discredit and criminalize the organization. Aegean Boat Report has been involved in hundreds of reports and investigations featured in international media and is regarded as a credible source of information about the ongoing situation in the Aegean Sea, especially pushbacks. I feel it's certainly because of this that I'm regarded and treated as a threat by the Greek government. The current Greek government has targeted several individuals and organizations in an effort to criminalize aid workers and NGOs, and where this is impossible, to spread the idea amongst Greek people that these individuals and NGOs are criminals. In 2018, under the previous government, Salam al-Din and Spanish lifeguard from ProMaid were charged and acquitted in court. A case against Sean Binder, Sara Mardini, and Nasos Kalkitos is still pending. As part of this case, the Greek police, entirely without reason, told media sources that Aegean Boat Report was involved and guilty of human trafficking. I had not committed any crimes, and no official charges were ever made against me or my organization. Indeed, most cases leaked by the government to the Greek media have never resulted in any charges at all. But because the Greek police leaked these unfounded accusations to the press, they were published as facts, with a picture of me, my full name, and my home address. This was a clear attempt to intimidate me to silence and resulted in death threats against me and my family from right-wing elements in Greece. Nor was this the only example of such intimidation. At the same time, organizations known to cooperate with Aegean Boat Report were confronted by secret police, told to stop sharing information with me, that I was under investigation, and any cooperation could lead to criminal charges and or closing of their organization's activities in Greece. Many felt they had to stop cooperating with me because they feared the consequences. This was a clear attempt to limit information coming out of the Greek Aegean Islands and make it difficult for me to continue to inform people about the situation. While working on the ground on Lesbos between 2018 and 2020, I was routinely harassed by the Greek police. My car and apartment were searched on a weekly basis, often at night, by the same people. Equipment was vandalized, videos and pictures erased, a combination of scare tactics and deletion of information to try to prevent me from doing my work. On July 9, 2020, in the Greek Parliament, New Democracy MP Konstantinos Bogdanos named Aegean Boat Report an enemy of Greece, guilty of espionage and cooperation with Turkey. None of this was true, and at best, Bogdanos must have known that he had absolutely no evidence to back these false claims, but he decided as a member of the Greek government to stand up in front of cameras in the Greek Parliament and pretend that this was the case. And things only get worse from here. On September 8, 2020, Notis Mitteracci held an online invite-only press conference in which she claimed Egen Boterbod, together with the Al Kahir Foundation, was leading a human trafficking ring taking people to Greece. The press conference was held on the same day as a large investigation into illegal pushback on Lesbos was published by Der Spiegel. It's impossible not to conclude that this was a deliberate attempt to discredit Egen Boterbod, the main source of the Spiegel investigation. In media friendly to the Greek government, it was reported that the investigation had been ongoing for some time, and we had been charged, of course. In reality, not such charges had been made, and none ever were. But this was nevertheless again leaked to the press from a so-called secret investigation. Once again, my picture and name was published by the Greek media in connection with these false claims. Another investigation was announced by the Greek authorities in Lesbos on July 19 this year. 10 people, 4 of them working for NGOs, were alleged to have been helping people to enter Greece, espionage and obstruction of police investigation. The day after, an article was published in the Greek newspaper Katamarini. In the article, Egen Boterbod was named, and as its administrator, I was named as the main target of this investigation. Details included in the article can only be found in the case files of the prosecutor office on Lesbos, which shows that this case was also leaked to the press to criminalize, smear, and intimidate people who hadn't and still haven't even been charged with anything. These allegations were made just a few days after a series of new reports about pushback by the Greek authorities were featured in international media, including a BBC report in which I participated, which drove the EU Commissioner from Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson, to publicly denounce Greek pushback as violations of our fundamental European values. It's almost impossible to imagine that these reports were not connected to the government's allegations. These allegations follow a common pattern to try to criminalize and delegitimize NGOs and aid workers. Detailed information, including organizations' name, personal data about individuals, and alleged charges are leaked to the press. There seems to be no procedural rights for people under investigation in Greece. And the issue is serious. From 1st of March 2020 to the end of September this year, over 19,000 men, women, and children have been illegally pushed back from the Aegean Islands by the Greek authorities. These pushbacks have included theft, beatings, sexual harassment, torture, and some cases drownings. Since March 2020, more than 350 life rafts carrying more than 6,000 people have been picked up by the Turkish authorities in the Aegean Sea. All have reported that the Greek Coast Guard set them adrift. It is no coincidence that while the Greek government is carrying out and enormously increasing these entirely illegal acts, they are accusing me of crimes including people trafficking, espionage, money laundering, and being a part of a criminal organization. Of course, none of these allegations are true, but if I were found guilty, I would face not years, but millennia in jail. Despite this, my work needs to continue. We have seen for a variety of reasons that organizations have been pushed away and prevented from helping. When I began this work, NGOs and organizations like UNHCR and MSF could be contacted when someone arrived, so people could be found and taken to a camp. Now there is no one. People are left to fend for themselves, alone, often for days, hiding in the woods. This includes sick people, old children, and pregnant women. The only organization left to contact is the Greek port police, and the result is almost always the same. People are set adrift, helpless, in life rafts in the Aegean Sea. The government and the police know they haven't a case that can be used in court, but leaked details about organizations like mine, which are published as if the people involved have been charged and convicted, though they haven't. There is no presumption of innocence before proven guilty, and no protection of personal data. There are only the government's continued attempts to criminalize, intimidate, and end the practices of organizations and aid workers who document and publish information about violations of international laws and human rights performed by the Greek authorities. And all this is done to attempt to silence those who speak up against these violations. By speaking here in this hearing, I will likely face new retaliations from the Greek government, if not directed directly towards me, then towards people I cooperate with in Greece. I can no longer travel to Greece to do my work. I would be arrested on arrival. Due to the criminalization of my organization and myself by the Greek government, I many times fear for my own and my family's safety. Today, we are complaining about how we are treated by the Greek government. But the one paying the ultimate price for the government's activities are not us, but the men, women, and children seeking safety in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy, very much for all of that. So Mary will, of course, be returning to all of these points when it's her turn to speak at the end. But now I'm going to call on Panayote Dimitras. Panayote, it's your turn, so please go ahead and take the floor.
Good morning and thank you. In 2015 and 2016, 3 intergovernmental expert bodies, namely ECRI of the Council of Europe and the UN Committees of Human Rights and for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, urged Greece to prosecute racist crimes, including racist speech, because the data until then were very few of such prosecutions. They did that mainly on the basis of reports that we had submitted to them showing the problem. Since then, in view of the recommendations, we decided that we could help the Greek state by reporting to them cases that we consider that they may constitute a racist crime, including a racist speech. And several hundred such reports were filed with prosecutors. Very few have, well, about 100 of them have led to either referral to trials or charges pressed but archived because of unknown perpetrators. In 2020, we decided after the March 2020, when the pushbacks started becoming massive, to include reports to the prosecutors about pushbacks, not based on our own research. We are not a based organization, but by collecting anything public, made public by the people who are here in this discussion and a few others, or sometimes just the media, and putting them in reports to the prosecutors. We have done it for more than a couple of hundred pushbacks involving more than 10,000 people. And then we realized that these activities were going a little too far for the Greek state, which has retaliated in 2 ways. One is that some of the reports for individual cases or for our first report on massive cases were assigned to the prosecutor of the naval court because the Coast Guard, unfortunately in Greece, depends on the naval court and not on the civil courts like police. The prosecutor of the naval court did something very simple when faced with documented allegations. They sent a letter to the Coast Guard. They got a reply that everything was fine. They agreed with the reply. They didn't cross-check. They didn't ask us. They didn't ask people who are mentioned in the reports as having witnesses or reported, including some of the people, again, from the organizations here. And in a couple of cases, in the end, not only they archived, but they decided that we intentionally filed false complaint, lying, and therefore we were fined with the fee of the corresponding trial, if there were a trial, which is about a couple of hundred euros plus taxes, etc. The beginning of this year, we realized that the special prosecutor for racist crimes in Athens decided or recommended that we are investigated for false reporting, considering generally that all the reports we made from 2016 until 2020, when she first filed that document, were false, all globally. Therefore, we should be investigated for continuous false reporting. When we first faced the case file, there were just one page with her recommendation. None of the alleged false reporting was in the file. Mind you that many of the reports we made to the prosecutor were archived with the final sentence saying that there was nothing false. There was just not enough evidence to show the aggravated circumstances that are required by the Greek law. However, because they wanted, just like my friend Tommy said, to chill us out, to drag us through an investigation. And supposedly today I should have gone and pick up the updated version of that case file because we are here. I asked to do that next week. All this information, by the way, I have translated in English. You meaning the special rapporteur. We have also including summary of this information, in addition to the things that you heard here from others, in the submissions we made this year, and they are public, to ECRI and the Human Rights Committee, which is preparing a list of issues for Greece, and ECRI is coming in November. This is a situation where we are facing And the third one is that we were informed that in one specific case in July, involving asylum seekers who managed the third time round to arrive in Kos. In Kos, people are put in prison more or less, not in open places. And they managed, when they were in prison, to force two of those people to say who organized their coming, and the alleged organizers, including Chida, who has spoken with his name and his face to BBC, were charged for forming a criminal organization made of Chinda, Mika, Tommy Olsen, and myself. And the Coast Guard investigation unit recommended that arrest orders be issued against the two asylum seekers I mentioned, Tommy and myself. Until now, the only ones arrested and then released because apparently the evidence was not very convincing were the asylum seekers. But it was clear that the Coast Guard is so upset because we have successfully averted pushbacks that they did it. Why successfully? Because from the beginning of the middle of this year, we realized that if we report people who have landed on the island with their names, all the personal information, documents they may have, pictures on the island, that they are there, it had prevented the Coast Guard and the police to throw them back at sea. Until recently, when even that didn't prevent. But by doing it, we were preventing them from getting those people on the islands and sending them back to Turkey, as they were usually doing. So because of this new activity on behalf of those people, they decided to include us as forming a criminal organization. And as I jokingly say, yes, we do form a criminal organization with the aim to prevent pushbacks. And we do that because the UN and the European Union special people, and they said that one of the duties of the NGR is to prevent pushbacks or record pushbacks. So we are doing it. And we are doing it, some of us collectively, and will continue to do it. So the recommendation to the special rapporteur is very simple, knowing the limited resources that she has. is to collect all this information with the help of all of us and issue or make one document extended with all those cases, as first asking the Greek government, as Mary said at the beginning, to respond within 60 days, etc., and then eventually make it public according to her assessment, the latest next year in the Human Rights Council's session, or earlier on because of the aggravated circumstances, perhaps with cooperation with other special rapporteurs, because it involves migrants, it involves racism, it involves discrimination, and perhaps see to it, in view of the fact that the Human Rights Committee is preparing a list of issues and CRC is meeting hopefully in January or February to review Greece. CEDAW has to schedule a review because it was cancelled because of all that, and somehow involving all those committees, because the only hope is that if there is a massive intergovernmental organization reporting negatively about Greece, it may induce the authorities to put a break to all that. And for example, we do know now for a fact.
Panayotis, sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to wind up now because we need
Yes,
to.
We do know for a fact that the funding of Greece was stopped at the European Union until they make a special investigation of the pushbacks is leading now Greece to launch such an investigation, special one. And this is why the UNHCR and organizations came up with recommendations how to do it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Panayotis. So we're going to move on immediately to the next speaker, who's Vasilis Sofiadelis. So Vasily, if you'd like to take the floor, it's yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So my name is Vasilis Sofiadelis. I'm the founder of Changemakers Lab. We advocate and use digital skills and social tech entrepreneurship as tools for empowerment, integration, and social cohesion. I moved to Lesbos permanently in 2016. I want to start by saying in 2015, I came to Lesbos to hold a hackathon to build solutions for refugees. And I've witnessed and came several times, and I've witnessed the change from how the people of Lesbos and in general in Greece, or the islands rather, were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, to turning a blind eye to pushbacks, to restricting freedom of movement, and to allegations of people being beaten up for leaving the camp without the relevant piece of paper. And all of this started in 2016. In 2016, there was a massive drop of 70% in tourism, and the majority of the business owners were blaming NGOs for this drop and for saying that NGOs are the ones that are bringing refugees. So this whole narrative, the incorrect and false narrative, started in 2016, and also the fear. So people that have not gone into contact with refugees in the villages outside of Mytilene, and even people in Mytilene on Lesbos that have not been in contact with refugees, all the fear and misinformation was the main narrative. That, along with the incorrect narrative of NGOs, which has continuously increased, and I would like to believe, and which peaked in February 2020. For those of you that do not know, the Greek government sent riot police in February of 2020 to enforce the building of the camp. And there was resistance from every single member on Lesbos. Both extreme right and extreme left people were at the harbor, where they were literally attacked by the Greek riot police over 2-3 days. It was critical. It was at a tipping point of, I would say, death was imminent. You may know that people on Chios, the police, the locals broke into the hotels where police were staying and attacked them. It was really violent. I was present at those events. And this is where the personal threats from myself started on Wednesday night. The riot police were called back. And I had made some suggestions to both people on the right and the left of what we could do. And on the Thursday morning, where the people on the extreme right, let's say, or supporters of the governor, they were standing outside the governor waiting for him to come out. And I'd gone there to ask what is happening. where one of the senior people within the group pulled out a chain in public and started screaming and shouting at me to beat and threatening me. And from that Thursday, I kept on getting threats every single day. Family were calling me saying that people know I've got an NGO. So just the fact that I've got an NGO, I'm part of the people that support refugees. Doesn't matter what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do, but I was getting continuous threats and people calling me to say I should be careful, to the point that on the Sunday evening, and for those of you that may not know, on that weekend is where people literally started stopping cars, grabbing people out and hitting them. A week before that in Moria, I got stopped by civil people to investigate like what my NGO or whatnot, because I could speak Greek, they let me go through. And so that Sunday evening, I literally left in complete and total fear, driving to, I felt like I was being a refugee leaving from Lesbos, the threats that I was getting. And so I came back. Now that I'm back on Lesbos, and that weekend as well, I was walking down the main street where quite a senior person said loud enough for me to hear, this is the person we should grab and beat up, just for the fact that I've got an NGO basically. And the last few months, I'm here on Lesbos, and several times people in public have started screaming and shouting at me, saying that I'm supporting refugees and I should leave from this place. And what I would like to see is what basically Marie and Issa mentioned. I really think it's critically important for government to acknowledge and recognize the amazing work that the majority of all NGOs are doing. That they should make a public reference to that to help change the incorrect narrative and perception that's going on. Just to illustrate the point a bit further, some friends came to visit and we tried to book them into a B&B, and the person said, listen, if these people are working for NGOs, we don't want them to stay here. So the situation is really it's quite concerning, and we need to change this narrative. And what the colleagues have also said about pushbacks, freedom of movement, and allegations of people being beaten up for leaving the camp without a paper. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share the story.
Thank you very much, Vasily, for that, and for sticking to the time. So we have a few more speakers, and I'm going to call on Maddie Williamson to go next. Maddie, if you can take the floor.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you, Mary, for listening to us, and for everyone for sharing your really incredible and horrifying testimonies about your experiences. I am a registered nurse from Seattle, Washington. My focus is on public and migratory health, and so part of this job is really observing at a human level what's happening with those who are forced to be on the move. And of course, when I work with NGOs, I also am focused on the health and well-being of all of the people around me and my colleagues. I've been in this space for 5 years. I've spent most of my time volunteering in Greece, but I volunteered in migratory contexts all over the MENA region mostly. And so what I will speak to today is the experience that I had when I was apprehended by Greek authorities in Chios this May. I traveled to Chios actually for vacation. I had worked there before, and so I was familiar about the steps that we needed to take to register with the authorities. I did not do any of this because I was not going to be volunteering with an NGO while I was there. Throughout my time there, everything was pretty quiet. I entered with the PLF forms. I had all of the necessary documentation to be in Chios. I traveled there unhindered. And when my colleague and I were trying to leave, we were apprehended by Greek authorities. We were taken into custody in the Port Authority station. We were separated, and she was questioned. She is American as well, but of Pakistani origin, and she experienced horrific racial profiling during her time in detention. In another room, I was subjected to an incredibly invasive, quote, strip search that I would actually say was more sexual harassment / sexual assault, because I was not adequately informed of what that search would entail. I've worked in criminal psychiatry. I know what a strip search that is intended to protect officers and to search for illegal contraband is supposed to look like. And this was not that. This was purely intimidation. It was incredibly uncalled for and invasive. And ultimately, I believe it had absolutely nothing to do with the reason why I was taken into police custody. As I said, I've been in this space for a long time. It's been 5 years now. And I'm well aware of what is happening to human rights defenders, to search and rescue people, and to those who are migrants. And I knew my rights when I was taken in. We asked repeatedly, both of us asked repeatedly to call a lawyer. We always have lawyers on call when we engage in this kind of work because we know that this police harassment is a perfect possibility. We were denied the right to call our lawyer repeatedly. I believe I asked up to 5 times at various points, and they deferred. They kept saying like, well, you know, they gave different reasons every time about why we were there. And finally, after about 4 hours, I reached the point where I was like, you need to tell me why I'm here. You need to show me the order for my arrest, and you need to explain what's going to happen and let me call my lawyer. And at that point, they said, you're here because your name came up in a search in an investigation in Lesbos, a place that I had not been since 2016. They could not see the full file or any of the information related to this investigation. And all they could tell me is that an order came through that morning. Actually, this was May 7th. That morning, an order had come through from a prosecutor in Mytilene to stop me and seize my devices. And so they took my electronic devices. They took my work phone, personal phone, my computer, and they took my diary for some reason. To this day, we have no idea how my name came up, why I was stopped. There's lots of speculation, of course. Myself and some of my colleagues are among the group that is named, not explicitly named in the case of the GM Boat report, but enough information was leaked to the media where we know that it's us. We found out all of this information about the follow-up with my device seizure through articles in the Greek newspaper, or even for something as unofficial as blogs. This information was being leaked to news outlets and publications before we were informed, and before the legal team, a whole team, multiple lawyers that we have appointed, were informed that anything had been advanced in regards to this investigation that they have us under. So the asks that I would have from someone in your position would be, I would echo everything that people have mentioned already, from fact-finding missions to some sort of statement that highlights, I think, the relationship between those of us who are human rights defenders, who are documenting these human rights abuses, who are advocating for safe entry of asylum seekers through search and rescue initiatives, but also to inquire about these procedural violations, because this is something that is uniform across all of these cases where the information is leaked, or where there have been other abuses of people's procedural violations throughout the entire process. I would ask that that's investigated in tandem with the same violations for asylum seekers who are either involved in some of the cases that we are named in, or who, as people have mentioned, are thrown in detention with no access to legal services or any sort of advocacy whatsoever. I would also request that some sort of investigation be made into specifically the media links. As Tommy mentioned, that is incredibly disruptive to people, not just psychologically, but also to their physical safety. When this information is incrementally leaked to the media versus being told to our legal teams, we don't know what the actual risks of our work is. We don't know. And should I be named openly, this could have intense consequences on my safety as someone working in the field, but I could also lose my nursing license for this. This could affect my organization, even though in this case, I was on a personal trip, and the distinction between what happened is clear from my organization and our work. But nonetheless, the consequences of this could be really significant, even just with the media leaks, even if formal charges are not pressed, even if these investigations just fall away, or if the charges and the investigations are officially dropped, acquitted, or closed, the consequences of these can still be severe. So thank you so much for your time and for your efforts. And again, for everyone else for coming on and sharing your experiences. And I appreciate your time.
Much, Maddie. So we're going to go straight on to the next speaker, who's Ms. Natasha Dailiani. Natasha, if you would like to go ahead and take the floor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. My name is Natasha Dailiani. I'm a lawyer and I work for Legal Center Lesbos. The Legal Center Lesbos is operating since 2016 in Lesbos, in Greece, and since 2019 it is registered as a civil non-profit organization. It provides free legal aid to migrants on the island of Lesbos and engages in broader solidarity work, advocacy, and strategic litigation in defense of migrant rights. It also advocates against the criminalization of migrants and those standing in solidarity with them in Lesbos. So apart from the various obstacles set in monitoring of human rights violations to pushbacks in the Aegean region by human rights defenders, combined with investigations launched and public statements of the Greek Ministry of Migration that create feelings of intimidation that have a chilling effect. And what has been observed, especially over the last 2 years, is an attempt of criminalization of any kind of expression of humanitarian aid or acts of solidarity in a broader sense, including human rights defenders, civil society activists, citizens, and migrants themselves. So for this hearing, I will focus on one specific example where a lawyer from Legal Center represented in court. It is an example of criminalization of anyone who is around a boat landing spot. So what happened in this case is in the early morning of November 17th, 2020, 25 Somali migrants landed on Lesbos Island after traveling by boat from Turkey, and one photographer, hereinafter Mr. M, living on the island that period, was near the group when the police arrived, and he was detained together with 3 journalists and the group of the 25. The migrants were taken on the police bus to a quarantine camp. He and the 3 journalists were escorted to the police station in Mytilene. The 3 journalists were released after several hours of questioning. However, the photographer was kept in the station. During his 24 hours of detention, 5 officers of the port police interrogated him in rotation and refused his repeated requests to have a lawyer during this questioning. The day after his arrest, he was brought before the prosecutor and investigating judge at the court, who charged him with 2 misdemeanor crimes: facilitating the illegal stay of migrants who had entered the country irregularly and disobedience. He was found guilty on both counts and sentenced to 14 months in prison, 1 year for facilitating the illegal stay and 2 months for disobedience. An appeal was filed immediately, and the prison sentence was suspended and he was ultimately released. However, all of the belongings the police confiscated from him in person and from his residence. It was the entire basis of his work as a filmmaker and photographer. It still remains in police custody as part of the investigation, and until such a time as a conviction will be overturned. Likewise, he was not allowed to take any copies of his work or cameras, memory cards, and so on. So he was convicted of facilitating the illegal stay in Greece of migrants, despite the lack of legal basis to prosecute this crime. He was convicted under Article 29, paragraph 6 of Law 4251 of 2014. However, no article of the penal code, of the Greek penal code, punishes the illegal stay in Greece of a foreigner who entered without legal permission, no matter how many years he stays without the legal permission. So this is actually a violation also of Article 7, paragraph 1 of the Constitution, which states that there shall be no crime, no punishment be inflicted unless specified by law in force prior to the perpetration of the act, defining the constitutive elements of the act. While the crime of illegal entry and attempted illegal entry exists in Greek penal code since 2005, there is no such crime of illegal stay. So despite this legal fallacy, Mr. M was convicted, and the only evidence presented that could have been constructed as facilitating anything for the 25 migrants was that he has given them water. So there was actually no other action, evidence, or anything brought as into court. He had no prior contact with the 25 migrants before they arrived, nor during the journey. The police prosecutor presented no such evidence and made no such argument in the court that would connect him in any way or with the smuggling network. And the last use of this article was in 2015 to prosecute individuals who carried migrants in their cars to help pregnant women to get to the hospital, or to help the people to further travel to take the ferry to Athens. And now we see that this is been used again, and the prosecution and conviction demonstrate the Greek authorities' apparent attempt to deflect public attention from the government's own criminal acts towards allegations of misconduct by migrants, non-governmental organizations, journalists, and anyone who might be a witness to or a hindrance to the commission of their own crimes. It is definitely related to the pushbacks reported these last years. This attempt to criminalize in such a way acts of solidarity and humanitarian acts. And we wanted to bring this to your attention as a very worrying development, along with all the other criminalization tactics presented today. And of course, the recommendation is the abolition of this article as it is unconstitutional, and otherwise to refrain from this abusive use in cases that do not substantially meet the objective. There was no facilitation which would require other specific actions. So there is a definite abuse and in connection to all other things that already have been stated by my colleagues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks to you, Natasha, for everything that you've contributed there. We've two more speakers, so I'm going to call on the second to last, who's Mr. Zacharias Kestis. Zacharias, it's over to you if you can take the floor.
Yeah, sorry for the camera. I'm connecting out of my office through my mobile phone and I'm in the middle of a court hearing. So I'm a lawyer based in Athens, and I'm handling various cases which are clearly part of an organized plan of criminalizing humanitarian work via also judicial harassment. More specifically, I represent Sean Bider and Sarah Mardini in the criminal case, which includes 24 volunteer members of NGO RSC and other NGOs. The case started in 2018 and is still pending on preliminary level, whilst regarding the less serious accusations, the misdemeanors, a trial has been appointed on the 11th of November 2021 in Mytilene. I'm also defending Salam Kamal Aldin, who, as the founder of the NGO Team Humanity, was accused along with a group of Spanish firemen of NGO Pro-Maid of the crime of migrant smuggling facilitation, and was acquitted in 2018 by the court of Mytilene. However, in 2019, he was characterized as dangerous for the public security and forced to abandon Greece in January 2020. His case is pending in front of the administrative courts. I'm also defending the NGOs Mare Liberum and Sea Watch, whose 35 members were included in a criminal case signed by the police head office of Mytilene in September 2020 for a number of serious felonies. The case is still pending in the investigation office and no suspect has been officially called. Also, I'm defending NGO Josur, which was included in a case signed by the same police head office of Mytilene 3 months ago for a number of felonies relevant to migrant smuggling facilitation. All the above cases have identical characteristics. They have been conducted by the same agency, the police head office of Mytilene, and have been signed by the same police officer, Mr. Michael Doulaveris, even though there is a 4 years distance between them. All cases include the same crimes: migrant smuggling facilitation, criminal organization, money laundering, and espionage. Also, all cases have the same pattern, description, and modus operandi. Last but not least, all cases are pending in the investigation office with no sign of coming to an end in the near future. So there are certain signs of management. All cases face serious violations which prove an intention of punishing NGOs and volunteers for their humanitarian work. In Sean Binder and Sarah Mardini case, though the judicial court had ordered the communications revealed for a period of 3 months, yet all communications of a period of 1 year have been included. The dialogues which have been illegally included aim to create non-based speculations. At the same time, the simple use of binoculars and the listening of open communication channels to the public has been christened espionage. While the presence on the coast and participation in search and rescue operations are defined as facilitating the movement of migrants. 3 years later, and while we have given all the necessary explanations and undenied evidence, the case remains at a standstill. In Salam Kalam al-Din, which was the first case of such nature in 2016, the same agency characterized him as dangerous for public security, although he was acquitted. The new decision includes no justification, and the police refuses to give us access to any relevant document for non-disclosure reasons. In this case, we do not only face a serious violation of the presumption of innocence, but also a number of other rights, such as the right to information or the right to a fair trial. In Mare Liberum, Sea-Watch, FMM, and Joshua cases, there is a similar pattern, since we face the same felonies while the NGO's board participated in rescue operation. In Joshua's case, the NGO was included in the criminal file because it is accused of reporting Facebook pushbacks. In total, the authorities not only fail to present the necessary evidence, do not even implement the Greek legal framework in a proper way. What they do is to interpret the criminal provisions totally arbitrarily, circumventing the scope of the law. Also, the humanitarian exception, which is legislated by Greek law, according to which the crime of facilitation does not take place in cases of rescue of persons at the sea or in case of persons requiring international protection, is never implemented. The attempt to punish the humanitarian organizations through the blatant violations of the presumption of innocence has also been highlighted in the clearest way. In all the above cases, the same police director has held press conferences where he spoke out about the dismantling of large criminal organizations of migrant smuggling. At the same time, they went so far as to appear on a TV show talking about the cases, while even the competent Minister of Immigration spoke publicly and took a position on the cases, although even today the Mytilene investigation office has not yet called those involved. The presumption of innocence is also violated through the long-term procedures which seem to never come to an end. So my request to the Special Rapporteur is to help change the narrative, address a letter to the government seeking information regarding the situation in Greece, conducting an investigation by interviewing the submitting a report as the result of the above investigation, and why not monitoring the RC trial, which is coming on this November. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Zacharias. So I'm going to hand it over to Mary now to respond to some of the things that you've said. Mary, over to you.
Very much. It's very sobering and difficult to hear you. I remember the first time several years ago when I came across, long before I was rapporteur, when I came across the crushing of humanitarian action and solidarity to asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, and the attacks on and smears, criminalization of human rights defenders. I couldn't believe it. And of course, since then, it has grown and grown. And the kind of, there's a kind of a thread going through what you've all said, you know, the things you're accused of: money laundering, espionage, illegal organization, criminal organization, organized crime. I think that's money. I said that, yeah. So that's really shocking. And then the leaking of information to the media. I think that is that's quite dangerous, as you said, because it can set people up for attacks online and offline, and it creates an environment. You all, not all, but some of you talked about the narrative and how changing the narrative is extremely important. And I totally agree with you. That the narrative needs to be changed, and that the work that human rights defenders are doing is legitimate. It should be recognized, as somebody said, and it is necessary apart from everything else. how we change the narrative, of course, is very difficult. Some of the recommendations that you've made to me about documenting, reporting and documenting and collecting the information and seeing how it could be furthered through intergovernmental organizations. I have to tell you, I'm actually not part of the UN system, so I don't have any control over the UN system. I will talk to the Special Rapporteur on migrants, and together we can perhaps think of some avenues that we can pursue. I have done a few communications, 3 communications. Since I took up the mandate. 2 were concerned with their defenders. One was looking at the broad situation of migrant rights in Lesbos and Chios, and there was a response from the government. And the other was another letter on the adoption of the law, which brought in new requirements for the registration of NGOs. So the 2 main issues that you have been discussing, the criminalization of migrant rights defenders and attempts to stop migrant rights organizations from registering and operating in Greece, is something we are very aware of. Changing the narrative, though, is something that we have to think much more carefully about. And I think that we need to see how we can do this in a better way, obviously. What I suppose and I can't promise you anything at the moment because I need to reflect and think. I can't do an official report unless it's an official country visit. And so that's one of the things that is not possible at the moment for me. But I will raise these concerns with member states ahead of Greece's UPR review, which is coming up next month, and urge them to make recommendations along these lines. I will think about how we can gather all the information that you have said into one document and how we can make it as official as possible. I don't know all the ins and outs. Maybe Michael, you can help me here, but I don't know all the ins and outs of how that might be possible without doing an official visit to Greece. And certainly for next year, I won't be able to. I can tell you that I'm already committed. And the academic visits that you can do, we could do an academic visit, but you can't have an official report. I need to find out from others the status of say documentation, if we did a documentation. One thing I wondered about, one of you, I think it was Tommy, I think it was, who talked about the EU Commissioner on Home Affairs. I missed that bit. Could you repeat that bit?
Hello. Yes. After some allegations have been published in the press, the EU Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johnson, publicly denounced Greek pushbacks as violations of our fundamental European values. She did that publicly after a large pushback report from the BBC. So I guess that was the part you were missing.
Yeah. Have you got that? Have you got that statement anywhere that you could send to us?
Yes, it's in the published article from the BBC. So I can send you a link.
Yeah, but if you could send it to Michael, it would be very helpful.
No problem.
So Michael, I can promise you that this is going to be an issue for me during the mandate, and I want to follow it as much as I can, bearing in mind that, of course, you know, I have to follow the world and all this, the situation of human rights defenders all over the world. But as I said, it is a priority for me. We'll start with the UPR. We'll investigate. We'll continue with communications. We'll investigate the best way of bringing the information together in the most effective form in order to try and change the narrative somewhat, and also to make clear that human rights defenders working on the rights of refugees and migrants are legitimate, and that they are carrying out their work in accordance with the UN Declaration of Human Rights Defenders and other international standards, and should not be subject to the kind of threats and smears and criminalization and unfair trials that are happening, and the sense of fear that is trying to be instilled in them. So if anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.